In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 college basketball games happening on December 14, 2025, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Troy versus UAB. If you look at this matchup on the surface, it is really easy to see why UAB is the home favorite and why the number landed around 2 to 3 possessions. They are sitting at 7 to 3-0. They are at Bartow Arena with a strong home track record, and they carry that big, grown man front line that pounds the glass and leans on people for 40 minutes. Troy walks in at 6 to 5-0 with a couple of confusing box scores, some blowout wins over smaller programs, and those wild multi-overtime games that make their stat sheet look like it has been drinking energy drinks. But if you slow down and look at how Troy has been getting to those numbers, the picture gets a lot more interesting. This is a team that already went on that brutal Western swing where they pushed San Diego State to double overtime in a 108-107 track meet, and then went right back out and dragged USC into triple overtime in another one-possession game. That stretch tells you 2 very different things at once. First, Troy is not scared of bigger names or physical defenses, and they can trade punches with high major rosters on the road for 40-plus minutes. Second, they are comfortable in chaos, which usually favors the side that is catching points, not the one that has to win by margin. Their overall scoring profile backs that up. They are averaging about 89.3 points per game, which sounds outrageous, but when you remember how many extra possessions those overtime marathons added, it starts to feel more like a team that is a step quick, aggressive, and willing to push, not some unstoppable offensive juggernaut that never slows down. On the other side, they are allowing about 79.5 points, so the gap is a shade under 10. That is a nice cushion when you are being spotted around 6 to 7 points, because the market is effectively saying UAB has to beat not just Troy, but the entire way Troy wants to play, by several possessions. What really keeps Troy in almost every game is the way they blend that tempo with pressure. Their defense is not built on long, grinding half-court possessions. It is built on making you uncomfortable, jumping lanes, and forcing live ball turnovers. Troy is averaging a little over 10 steals per game, and their own game notes put them around 20th nationally in that category. That kind of mischief travels, especially against a UAB team that likes to attack off the dribble and can get a little loose with the ball at times. Every tipped pass that turns into a runout is both free offense for Troy and one fewer UAB possession to stretch this game out to a blowout. Of course, the concern, if you like the dog, is pretty obvious. UAB is built like a sledgehammer around the rim. They pull down about 44.3 rebounds per night and are living on second chances with something like 15-plus offensive boards a game, while Troy is sitting around 41.7 on the glass with a solid but not overwhelming offensive rebounding profile of their own. That is a lot of extra bites at the apple for the home side, especially in a game where Troy is probably happy to let the pace breathe a little. But, and this is where the spread really starts to wobble, Troy has already shown in that San Diego State and USC stretch that they can survive in games where they do not dominate the glass, as long as they win turnovers and hit enough shots from the perimeter. They have been living in that sweet spot where they might lose the rebounding battle by a couple, but they more than make up for it with steals and extra possessions created by pressure. There is also the UAB defensive personality to think about. They are holding teams to about 70.5 points per game on roughly 41% shooting from the field and under 30% from beyond the arc, which is quietly very impressive. But that style, strong at the rim and disciplined in the gaps, tends to squeeze pace more than the raw season average might suggest. If you are asking that kind of team to cover a number in the mid-single digits against a dog that plays loose, hits threes, and is not afraid of the moment, you are basically betting on them to stay locked in for all 40 minutes and never let that backdoor crack open. History says that is a risky bet, especially in December when rotations are still being tweaked and guys are still figuring out roles. So on one side you have UAB's bigger frame, home court, and rebounding edge, and on the other you have Troy's tempo, pressure defense, and track record of hanging around with strong stronger rosters in true road environments. When you put all of that together and then layer in the fact that the market is asking UAB to win comfortably against a team that basically thrives on being the scrappy side, catching disrespect, it becomes pretty hard not to lean toward the points in your pocket rather than the home favorite needing a clean cover. As our first pick for this matchup, the Troy Trojans to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. You see Troy's average of 89.3 points and UAB's 82.4, and the first instinct is to think track meet, something like 90 to 80 that sails over by halftime. Odds makers are not fools though. They have already baked in the overreaction from those double and triple overtime box scores, and they are also staring at the same defensive profile that shows UAB, in particular, playing a much stingier brand of basketball than those raw Troy scores suggest. UAB's defense deserves a closer look here. They are only giving up about 70.5 a night, and the way they do it matters. Opponents are shooting roughly 41% from the field and under 30% from deep, which usually means a lot of empty trips where the ball dies in the mid-range or on contested drives that end in tough finishes instead of rhythm threes. Add the rebounding piece, about 44.3 boards per game with a heavy emphasis on owning the glass, and you get a team that not only stops the first shot often but also limits the second. That is how unders tend to cash quietly, not because nobody can score, but because every possession becomes a little more expensive, a little more annoying, and every run takes longer to build. Troy's box scores are loud, but underneath the noise they can absolutely get dragged into games that land in the 70s. Their overtime thrillers inflate the scoring, but they have had plenty of nights against mid-major opponents where the pace feels fast, but the efficiency drops when the jumpers do not fall. When that happens, their pressure defense actually cuts both ways. Yes, it can create easy buckets, but it also burns energy, leads to fouls, and sometimes forces their own offense into quick, low-quality shots that send them jogging back the other way. That style can make a game look like it is on the verge of exploding, when in reality both teams are just trading short, messy possessions that chew clock without piling up clean points. Recent totals trends quietly lean in the same direction. UAB has seen the under hit in 4 of its last 5 overall, and they have not exactly been playing rock fights against bad offenses. They have handled South Alabama, Southern Illinois, UTEP, and Drake while still keeping totals on the lower side more often than not. Troy, on the other hand, has split their recent over and under results, which makes sense for a team whose style produces a wide band of outcomes, but remember that a lot of those overs needed bonus basketball. In regulation, more of their games sit closer to that mid-70s range than the final score might suggest if you just skim the scoreboard ticker. Put it all together and you have a high posted total that is being shaped by perception as much as by raw efficiency. Troy's pace and scoring spikes are pulling the number up, while UAB's quieter, more physical defensive profile is pulling it down, and the actual ceiling of the game probably sits below what those early season fireworks imply. If this contest settles into something like a tense, whistle-heavy afternoon in a true road environment for Troy, with UAB's size cleaning the glass and both teams having to work for clean looks, then there is a very real path where the game feels entertaining and even a bit frantic, and still sneaks in under that lofty number. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Kent State versus Portland. Kent State's scoreboard crew probably feels like they are typing the same number every night lately because the Golden Flashes just keep stacking big offensive showings and comfortable margins. They roll into this matchup at 9-1 on the season, 9-1 riding a 9-game win streak, winning by nearly 18 points per game and putting up about 98.5 points a night. That is not just winning, that is steamrolling. On the other side, Portland sits at 6-4, which looks solid on paper, but the story shifts once you care about the spread. The Pilots are only 3-5 against the number, and when they have stepped up in class, like those trips to Wyoming and Stanford, they have not just lost, they have been smashed by 37 and 22 points. You can feel the gap between a team that knows exactly what it is and a team still finding out what happens when the talent level across from them jumps a tier. Here is the thing, Kent State is not living on lucky shooting nights or a soft schedule alone. They play a style that is genuinely hard to live with for 40 minutes. They are right near the top of the country in both tempo and offensive firepower, firing a ton of threes, pushing the ball after misses, and trusting several different ball handlers to keep the pace high. That kind of system usually travels well. It is a lot easier for a fast, guard-driven team to stay itself in a hostile gym than it is for a slower, post-heavy group to suddenly find extra gears on demand. Portland, by contrast, has shown real quality in stretches at home, but they are also giving up over 81 points a game and letting opponents hit almost 11 threes on average. Against a Kent team that is happy to attack early in the clock and keep the pressure up from tip-off to final buzzer, that defensive profile feels like playing with matches in a dry forest. Portland's own results tell on them a bit. When a game tilts against them, it can tilt in a hurry. Those blowouts at Wyoming and Stanford were not random bad days. They were what happens when a free-scoring opponent keeps landing punches while the Pilots struggle to get stops. And now they face a Kent State group that is even more relentless offensively than those teams, with a deeper rotation and a more confident rhythm. The Pilots are not a bad team, but they are walking into a matchup against a machine that has already proved it can tear through mid-major defenses that are sturdier than what Portland has shown so far. Momentum and mindset play into this as well. Kent State has already shown they can take their act on the road and to neutral courts without losing their identity, including cracking triple digits away from home and grinding out an overtime win against a tough Wright State squad. They have rewarded their backers across the board, putting together a strong 5-2-1 record against the spread, which usually means the market has been a step slow to catch up to how good they really are. Portland has gone the other way, dropping 5 of 8 line games for bettors and still trying to figure out how their pieces fit when the talent across from them can punch back. When one team is rolling, covering, and clearly comfortable in its own skin, and the other is still working through stress tests against stronger opponents, it is natural to lean toward the group that has already proved it can not just win, but win by margin. So when you combine Kent's explosive, sustained scoring, their willingness to keep the accelerator down late, and their track record of turning ordinary wins into blowout covers, this number looks very manageable. Portland's home gym gives them some comfort, sure, and the Pilots can absolutely score enough to throw a scare or two into a favorite, but the problem is that Kent is perfectly built to stretch gaps. Volume threes, transition buckets off turnovers, and late free throws from a veteran group that keeps attacking are exactly how road favorites sneak past the spread. With the line sitting in what has been treated as a single-digit window as this was prepped, it is hard not to trust the hotter, deeper, and more battle-tested side to eventually create the cushion they need. As our first pick for this matchup, the Kent State Golden Flashes to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Kent State is not just winning high-scoring games, they are living in them. They have already scored at least 90 in 8 of their 10 contests, with a couple of wild outbursts where they hung 123 and 111 on overmatched opponents. That is what happens when a team embraces pace, runs off misses, and hunts early offense before defenses can catch their breath. You can see the philosophy on the stat sheet, but you can also feel it in how quickly their games get up and down. There are not many empty, slow possessions here. It is a lot of open floor, a lot of threes, and a lot of pressure on the rim. Portland, for its part, actually leans in a similar direction when you remove the brand names and look at what happens in their gym. They sit near the top of the national charts in shooting efficiency, and they have a front court and perimeter mix that works best when the game loosens up. At Chile's center, that style has produced some eye-popping scorelines. They have already dropped 120 on Willamette, 103 on Cal State Fullerton, and 104 on Lewis and Clark, and they are averaging 84.4 points per outing overall. Even in that road loss at Stanford, against a high major defense, Portland still managed to get to 72. So while their defense has been leaky, their offense is built to keep throwing punches, especially on their home floor. The defensive side of the equation might be the loudest argument for a higher scoring outcome. Kent State is not a lockdown outfit statistically. They are allowing over 80 points per game and have already seen opposing teams hit at least 77 in 6 separate contests. That usually signals a fast style, but it also means they will trade baskets if you are willing to run. Portland's defense has been even more forgiving, giving up more than 81 per game and watching opponents knock down close to 11 threes a night. 4 of the Pilots' last 5 games have hit at least 160 total points, and that is with a big outlier earlier in the season when they managed only 56 at Wyoming. When both teams bring aggressive, perimeter-heavy offenses into the gym and neither has a habit of stringing together long, clean defensive stretches, points tend to pile up quicker than you expect. There are also some subtle situational nudges that tilt this game toward a more free-flowing rhythm. Kent State is traveling west, but they get a comfortable afternoon local tip and are not in any kind of brutal back-to-back spot, which usually keeps legs fresh enough to maintain their desired tempo. They have already shown they are not interested in stepping off the gas when they are in control. Even blowouts have ended with them flirting with or crossing the 100-point mark. Portland, meanwhile, has every reason to embrace a fast game at home. Their offense is more advanced than their defense right now, and trying to turn this into a slow, bruising grind against a more physical Kent group would probably play against their strengths. If both benches lean into their natural identities, that means more possessions, more threes, and more chances for scoring runs on both ends. Put all of that together and you get a matchup where pace, shot selection, and recent trends all lean in the same direction. Kent State wants games in the 90s. Portland is most comfortable when the ball is flying and the scoreboard is moving, and neither defense has consistently shown that it can squeeze the life out of a game for a full 40 minutes. The market number that was talked about for this one sat in the mid-160s range, roughly around 164 to 165.5 depending on the book, which is undeniably high, but not crazy when you weigh Kent's top-tier scoring machine against Portland's knack for turning home games into shootouts. If this turns into the kind of up-tempo, three-happy affair both sides prefer, it is very easy to see the combined score climbing past a lofty total rather than stalling out halfway. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. St. Mary's versus Boise State. This matchup has that weird holiday showcase feel where it looks like a neutral site on the graphic, but you know exactly whose colors will be louder in the building. You have St. Mary's sitting at 9-1, officially listed as the road team, and Boise State at 7-3 with the Broncos technically at home again in Idaho Falls, a spot they already turned into a happy place against this program the last 2 seasons. From the St. Mary's side, the script is familiar, but the cast has changed just enough to matter. They still love a slow, stubborn half-court game where every possession feels like an exam, but now the questions get asked by guys like Josh Dent at the point, Mikey Lewis on the wing, and Paulius Morauskas as the main scorer. Morauskas is leading them in points per game, Andrew McKeever is vacuuming up rebounds, and Dent is quietly steering traffic as the assist leader, which fits perfectly with what this staff has always wanted, a guard who can run things without rushing things. What really tilts things toward the Gales is how hard it is to shake them out of their rhythm once they settle in. The numbers back up what you feel watching them. They score well over 70 points a night while holding opponents in the low 60s. They defend without fouling too much, and they close possessions with the kind of rebounding that usually travels even when the shooting does not. They use that to slowly lean on teams, possession after possession. You can fall behind early against them, but if you are Boise here, you really do not want to be chasing them for 30 minutes while they keep getting clean, set looks out of their half-court stuff. Boise State, on the other hand, is not just a scrappy underdog in this spot. They are 7-3 for a reason. They have their own top-tier efficiency profile, and they have already proved in this exact building that they are comfortable playing St. Mary's in a tight, late-game situation. The Broncos knocked off the Gales here 63-62 seasons ago, and then again 67-65 in overtime last year. So they walk into Idaho Falls knowing they can handle the moment, the sightlines, and the setup. That kind of recent history matters in a room when you are talking about confidence, even if it does not show up in any analytic. Roster-wise, this Boise group is built to stretch you out a bit more than some of the older Broncos teams. Dylan Andrews has stepped in and taken a ton of responsibility on the ball. Drew Fielder gives them efficient scoring as a big who can finish and make good use of his touches. And wings like Javan Buchanan, Andrew Meadow, and RJ Keene give them length and shooting around the edges. They are also getting solid minutes from depth pieces like Aginaldo Neto, Dominic Parolin, and Pearson Carmichael, which lets them stay physical without completely gassing their starters. So you end up with a very clean handicap question. If the game is decided by which team can get good shots late, protect the ball, and win the glass on a neutral floor that leans orange and blue in the stands, do you trust the more proven St. Mary's structure or the Broncos' familiarity with this arena and their balanced front court? There is a decent revenge angle for the Gales here after back-to-back one-possession losses in this same building, and this version of St. Mary's has been more efficient on both ends than Boise through the first 10 games, while also owning one of the best free throw and three-point profiles in the country. When you combine that with their typical late-game composure, it nudges this essentially pick-em spread toward the side that can grind, set the pace, and close the final 2 minutes at the stripe. As our first pick for this matchup, the St. Mary's Gales to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The first instinct when you hear St. Mary's and Boise State in the same sentence is to picture a rock fight, and that comes from real history. Their last two meetings in this building finished 63-60 and 67-65 in overtime, so the recent series has leaned toward long possessions, heavy defense, and scores that make underbettors feel very clever. The catch is that both teams look a little different on the offensive side this season. St. Mary's is averaging 81 points a night with a top 20 type defensive number, which sounds like a contradiction until you realize how efficient they are on their good nights. They are hitting free throws at an elite rate and shooting threes at a clip that already sits near the top of the national leaderboard. So even when the pace stays measured, the points per trip stay pretty healthy. Boise State has quietly turned into a more explosive offense too. The early season stat sheet has them around 79 points per game, and if you look at their recent results, you see scorelines like 86-64, 77-68, and that 102-76 win that looked like a video game for a stretch. Even their losses to North Carolina State and Southern California sat comfortably above this projected total when you add both sides together. St. Mary's recent game log tells a similar story. Outside of the Vanderbilt blowout, which completely got away from them, their finals have hovered in a band that brushes or clears the number, with 70-61 at Davidson, 77-66 against Virginia Tech, 70-65 over Wichita State, and that 96-42 tune-up win where the Gales almost cashed this total by themselves. None of that guarantees a shootout, but it does hint that both teams are more comfortable living in the high 60s and 70s these days, instead of those old 59-54 type grinders. Another small thing that tilts the scoring conversation up is the way St. Mary's plays through contact. Their free throw volume has been excellent through the first chunk of the season, which does two helpful things for anyone eyeing the total. It gives you points with the clock stopped, and it often drags games into long, whistle-filled finishes when the score is tight. Boise, for its part, is attacking more through dribble penetration and ball screens with Andrews and Keene, and that usually means more chances to get into the bonus themselves if the officials are even slightly tight with the whistle. The one real argument for a lower scoring contest is tempo, because both teams still sit on the slower side of the national pace charts, and you can absolutely imagine a first half where both coaches are happy to grind in the half court and treat every possession like gold. But when you balance that slower pace against how efficient these offenses have been, how many shooters are on the floor for both sides, and how much late-game fouling we are likely to see if it plays out as another one-possession thriller, the picture starts to look more like a game that creeps into the upper 130s or even brushes 140. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Washington State versus USC. USC steps into this matchup playing the role of big brother and not the nice, sharing kind either. 9-1 on the season, scoring right around 89.5 points per game, and sitting comfortably in the national top 25 on offense. This group has been playing fast, confident basketball at a pace north of 77 possessions a night. That tempo number tells you a simple story. They do not mess around with walking the ball up and feeling their way into games. They press the gas, trust their depth, and dare you to keep up for 40 minutes. On the other side, Washington State arrives at 3-7, carrying a scoring margin that sits just under -3 and giving up close to 80 points per outing. That is the kind of profile that makes a long road trip to Los Angeles feel even longer, especially when you are catching a double-digit number in a hostile building. The Cougars have shown flashes, but the pattern has been familiar. Good stretches followed by lapses where the offense stalls and defensive possessions drag on without that last rebound. For a team that has already been outscored on average and is still looking for its voice in a new conference setup, those lapses matter a lot more in a game like this. Here is the thing. The history between these two in Los Angeles leans heavily to one side. USC has taken 7 of the last 8 at home in this series, and Washington State has gone 1-7 straight up in those trips with only 2 covers against the spread in its last 9 road games and a 5-15 slide against the number across its last 20 overall. That is not bad luck. That is a pattern of struggling to travel. You know how some teams pack their defense in their carry-on and some accidentally check it to another city? Washington State has felt a bit like the second group lately. Layer on the health picture. Washington State has had rotation players miss time already this season, which matters when you are trying to survive an up-tempo road game and you do not have endless bodies to throw at ball handlers. USC has had its own issues, especially in the backcourt, including a freshman guard dealing with a knee injury and others popping up on recent injury reports, yet the offense keeps humming along. That combination, a deeper, high-scoring home side against a thinner road team that has not consistently closed games, tends to tilt late-game runs in only one direction. So when you put it all together, the overall flow points toward the favorite turning this from a competitive early stretch into something more stretched out as legs get heavy and the crowd gets louder. The matchup predictor models agree, giving USC around a 96% win probability, which, while never a guarantee, does tell you how strongly the numbers lean in one direction. Over the full 40 minutes, it feels more likely that the favored side extends away rather than allowing this to stay inside single digits deep into the second half. As our first pick for this matchup, the USC Trojans to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Washington State's profile is quietly important here. Their games so far are averaging about 76.7 points scored and 79.6 allowed, which lands you in the mid-150s for total points. That is already a few buckets under the current number. On top of that, the under has already cashed in 5 of their last 7, which hints at a team that can drift into slower or more disjointed game scripts, even when the opponent is plenty capable of scoring. Pair that with the fact that they are not exactly elite on the glass or at maintaining clean offensive flow, and you get a team that can let a few empty trips stack up in a hurry. Tempo is the other big lever. One side wants to run and score freely, the other tends to land in a more measured, slightly choppier style. When those two styles clash, you do not always get pure chaos on the scoreboard. Sometimes you get a tug of war where the faster team surges, then the game bogs down in half-court possessions, fouls, and coaching adjustments. If there is even one long stretch where Washington State's offense goes cold or settles for jumpers without paint touches, the math on a total that high starts to feel heavy. There is also the human side that numbers do not always capture cleanly. In games with a very high total, you are almost rooting for everything to keep humming. No long reviews, no scoring droughts, no bench units that just want to bleed clock and get out healthy. But late in games where the margin starts to look comfortable for one side, coaches often shorten possessions defensively and lengthen them offensively, and both teams drift into let us live to fight the next one mode. That type of finish can pull a game away from the fireworks show a 160-plus total suggests. So while the headline numbers point toward pace and offense being available, the combination of Washington State's recent undertrend, their average game totals sitting below the line, and the real risk of at least one extended dry spell makes this total feel a bit inflated. It is not that scoring will be hard to find, it is that both teams need to keep the foot on the gas for a very long time to clear a number this tall. And the more realistic script includes at least one lull that drags things down. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.